Aora, a world where mortals live, die, and are reborn through the turning of the wheel. The cycle of reincarnation watched over by the gods, and made possible through pillars of a mystical substance known as Audra. 5 years ago, you traveled from your home to the Deerwood, a nation that had waged war against the incarnated god of light, Aethys, resulting in his destruction. The country suffered from a plague of hollowborn, infants born without souls, that many believed was punishment for killing a god. In an ancient, secluded ruin, you witnessed a secret ritual that inadvertently transformed you into a watcher. One who can see and speak with souls. The ritual also gave you horrible visions, waking nightmares of a past life that threatened your sanity. To put them to rest, you pursued the man who had led the ritual, a seemingly immortal agent of the gods, known as Theos Ix Arcanon. With divine assistance, you confronted and defeated Theos, ending your visions and resolving the Hollowborn crisis. In so doing, you also learned the great secret that Theos had protected. That the ancient empire of Anguith had transformed themselves into gods. Your visions finally put to rest, you retired to the castle of Cadnua, built atop a massive statue of pure Audra, where you ruled in relative peace and prosperity.
Made a nice story. You fixing up that old keep? Lifting the curse? Must have told it 100 times. But something got to gnawing at me. Thinking the spirits there weren't really at rest. But maybe the gods weren't finished with us. I used to dream that when my God came back, he would forgive us. Last the trouble with dreams. Sooner or later, we all have to wake up.
What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you our story of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire story series. As the intro should have explained to you, basically Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire takes place 5 years after the original game, and in the interim, the Watcher, the protagonist of the first game, had been enjoying life in Cadnua, the keep that he took over in the first game. However, at some point, again as the cinematic should have shown you, the statue beneath Cadnua, known as Marosnua, I think is how it's pronounced, but the statue basically, is possessed by some being, pops up out of the land, and kills you outright. And the game picks up pretty much right there, actually. Now, jumping into this, just to give a couple quick caveats, while this is the story series for the second game, I am going to be spoiling the crap out of the first game because the second game here is like a direct continuation of that storyline in a lot of ways. So there's no real way to talk about the story of this game without spoiling the first game, just to give you a bit of a heads up. Now also, we are basically going to be covering the critical path of the game, which is to say the main plot. We're not going to be covering a ton of side quests or any of the DLCs really. There is an important thing that happens in one of the DLCs that I will explain towards the end of the story series because that's where it's going to fit in. And it is relevant to the plot of these games, so that's the only reason I'm mentioning it. But we're not going to be covering a ton of the side content. However, We will be covering it a little bit in a few places because there is a point where you kind of have to do some of the side quests in the game to carry on the plot. And lastly, I just want to say that Deadfire is probably my second favorite CRPG style game of all time. I'm a huge fan of it. I've played it quite a bit. It is a game I have 100%ed, despite people constantly calling me a turn-based shill. I actually love the real-time with pause, though, that said, they did add a turn-based mode into Pillars of Eternity 2 here. However, we're going to be playing real-time with pause because that's the way this game was designed, and frankly, because of that, I think it plays better in that mode. Let's actually get into it here. So the game starts after those cinematics and story intros with us being a spirit walking along the wheel. We can walk down this path. It's going to show us some events from the first game, actually, before we make our way to Barath. Now, Barath is actually the god of death. She takes on two forms, the Usher and the Pallid Knight. The Usher is an old dwarven guy. I think he's dwarven. But he's an old guy. And then the Pallid Knight is the female version clad in black armor. You come across Barath in this sort of beyond area. I think they call it the in-between. And she is at a desk going over tarot cards and tells you to sit down. So Barath kind of explains the situation here. That statue was possessed by the dead god Eothas. Eothas was the god of light before he was killed in the Saints' War, which is an event that happened prior to the first game, actually. And while Barath and the other gods know that Eothas is definitely the one who possessed this statue, they don't know what he's doing or why. So what they're asking you to do is to track down Eothas and try to figure out what it is he's doing and why he's taking this physical shape on Eora. I just want to mention real quick before we get into the nuts and bolts of this that you can actually decline this request, and if you do, you die and the game ends, and that's it. I just thought it was funny that they added that in. Because, as I mentioned, this is a direct continuation of the first game, Obsidian actually worked in several methods to create your story from the first game and carry it over the second one here. The way this works is it's actually more of a world state than anything else. It doesn't affect any of the main plot lines, but if you import a save from the first game, or if you make a custom decision save, I think that was an option. I don't know if they still do that, but at one point you could make a custom save through decision making on a website, and then they would give you the save file for that, then you could import it that way. I don't know if that's available anymore, but it used to be a thing. Or you can pick one of the 6, I believe, options of general paths through the game, the first game that you could have taken. Now, again, these are just kind of world states. They don't make a huge difference. It's more of how certain characters feel about you, or in some cases, whether or not some characters are alive or not. And that's probably the biggest decision you're going to make out of this is, depending on your choices you made in the first game, some of these characters can just straight up not be, living. That's probably the biggest change that can happen through this choice. Barath essentially gives you the choice to import that save or pick a world state predetermined by Obsidian and move on with the game, and then from there it goes on to character creation. I've actually covered that a bit more in depth in an old video of mine, so I'm not really going to go over it here, but I'll try to link that down below if I remember it. And then, once all that's out of the way, Barath sends us on our way to reunite our soul with our body a little farther up down the path. Now we come to on a ship with our good companion, Adair, in a seat near our unconscious body. Now, Adair kind of fills in some of the gaps where basically they could tell you weren't completely dead, and that the farther Eothas' statue was getting from you, the less life you had in you. So they chartered a ship and started following this giant statue all the way to the Deadfire archipelago and away from the Deerwood where you were when this started. Now, in the middle of this, a ship member, or crewmate, or a member of the crew from the ship you're on, bursts into the room and asks to speak with you, because apparently you were made the captain despite you being unconscious. And basically he's saying that you guys are being docked by pirates who are looking to parley with the captain, which is you. So you go outside, you find out that exactly that, you're being attacked by pirates. So there's a conversation regardless of what option you pick speech-wise. You will always be attacked right here. However, the leader says he's going to leave his pirates to take over your ship, and then he's going to sail off. Now, there's a storm happening while all this goes down. This is your first fight. Once you kill off all of these pirates, the storm overtakes the ship, and the ship wrecks. There is a little text event where you can either save a supply crate or a crew member. It's not a big decision, but there you go. Either way, the storm wrecks your ship, and all of you and your ship wash up ashore on an island. Now you come to Adair and the steward of Cadnua, which is the talking head statue from the first game that inhabited the keep of Cadnua, who also came with you, because why not, are washed up on the beach as well, and they tell you that they don't really know where you are, but it's likely that there's a Valen settlement nearby, Valen being one of the cultures of the world of Aora, and that basically you should gather what survivors you can and then see if there's a settlement you can head by. And so you can do exactly that. You can, real quick, while you're on the beach, gather up all the survivors, which I recommend you do, and then you head out to Port Maj. So in order to do that, you have to head to the world map. Now, the world map here functions much differently than the first game. So on Deadfire, it's an archipelago, so there's going to be ship stuff going on later, but right now we're landlocked on this island. However, you can freely move about the world map, which was not the case in the first game. You could only travel from point A to point B. Here, you can move around freely. That said, because we're locked onto this island, there's really not that much to go explore at the moment. So the main thing you really want to do is head straight for Port Maj, which is pretty much due north of where you are now. Now, when we arrive, there's going to be a scene going on between the settlers of the Valen settlers and the local Amawa. And basically, there's some sort of agreement between the two, and it seems to be grating here lately. And upon your arrival, the governor, Clario, realizes that you were probably attacked by pirates and asks for your help because you are an outsider. He asks you to come speak with him at his estate. So if you follow him and go speak with him, he explains that he can have the resources to get your ship up and running again. However, he needs help with a certain matter because, obviously he's going to get some work out of you too. So Clario explains that the reason they are settling this island is because that the Valen Trading Company, which is to say the Valen faction, is settling the Deadfire archipelago to look for a substance called luminous Audra, which Audra should have been mentioned in the pre-cinematics here that we watched, so I'm not going to go over it again. But basically, it harbors soul energy, and animancers study it and manipulate that soul energy into new technology. Now, Old Vela is using this because the Deadfire archipelago is so rich in Audra as a research site. However, after that storm, which wrecked a bunch of ships along with pirate problems, as long as the local problems are going on with the Amawa as well, he basically needs you to go investigate a nearby Nguithan dig site and see why he hasn't heard from his animancers or researchers there. And worst case scenario, he needs you to recover the head animancer, Odysseus, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. But either way, he needs you to get that guy's notes, worst case scenario. And that's pretty much what we need to do in Port Maj. Now, from here, before we actually leave, we can pick up our second companion, the first being Adair, of course. Our second companion can be Joti, X-O-T-I, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm terrible with pronunciations. She is actually a priestess of Gon. Now, Gon is actually an aspect of Aothis. Aothis, being the god of light and life and redemption, has a darker side to him, and that is, death and stuff resulting in rebirth. Gon is kind of the darker depiction of Aothis, but that is what Jodi is a priestess of, and she can accompany you because she sees it as her job to help shepherd lost souls into the afterlife. And because there's so much death following this storm and all this, that, she wants to go do that and offers to come with you. Now, once we get to the Nguithan dig site, in the middle of that map, basically, there's a bunch of monsters guarding a weird-looking cage of sorts. Now, once we get all of those monsters cleared out, we find them inside of that weird cage, where they had basically locked themselves in it to save themselves from these monsters. And they explain that while they were studying animancy and stuff, that suddenly all the nearby animals just went crazy and attacked them and basically wiped the settlement out. And then all this storm came through, plus Aothis, the giant statue, literally stepped through this dig site. So they've had a lot going on. And after you've freed them, they ask you to go down below where most of the research was happening and look for their leader, the Odysseus guy. Now, before we do that, they offer you the service of one of their animancers called Ingirth. However, you recognize that this is not actually who that is, because the person standing before you is none other than Aloth, one of the other companions from the first game, who you haven't seen in many years. He silently kind of hey, don't blow my covers, you, and you can choose to either blow his cover or not. It doesn't really matter much here, to be honest. But then Aloth will accompany your party to help search, and basically he's like, listen, I'll explain what's going on with this in a little bit, but right now we need to focus on the immediate problem. And then Aloth can join you. And that's all of the companions you can get on Port Mage that aren't generic. So you can go to the tavern in Port Mage and hire adventurers, which are just generic NPCs really that can come along and help you out. Which, if you're playing on Path of the Damned, I actually do recommend you do that, because it will make some of these fights a little easier if you have a full group of 5. Now, from here we drop down into the actual dig site level of the Engwithan dig site. We fight through a bunch of monsters to the far side of the area, where we're going to find a Pillar of Audra, and the corpse in front of it is none other than the head researcher guy. Now we can find his notes on him, which we were supposed to get for Governor Clario, as well as commune with the Aedra statue when we get close to it, inadvertently through our powers as a Watcher. For those who have forgotten, our character is a Watcher. That is to say that we are a Watcher of souls, as again, the intro cinematic should have explained, but just to say it again. Essentially, a Watcher can see past the shroud of the world and see souls, and those souls can see them back. And through that, they can gain a lot of knowledge and solve a lot of mysteries that other people can't even begin. However, they are prone to going crazy. You solved all that, though, in the first game. Now, through your ability as a Watcher, and the fact that Audra is basically a conduit for soul energy, Watchers and Audra kind of have a weird connection. So you find this Audra Pillar and you start communing with it. Inadvertently, it just kind of happens. So before you know it, you find yourself in direct contact with Aothis in an area called the Beyond. So basically, you're kind of like astral planeswalking, talking to this guy through the Audra Pillar. And while he doesn't really give you much information, he basically explains that there's no need to worry. He's got something going on and planned that's going to help everyone. However, he has to do all this, terrible stuff with stomping through the world, destroying things in the meantime. But in his own words, something beautiful is coming. And then, before you have a chance to really follow up on that, he severs the connection that was made through the Audra Pillar, and he's moving on. Now, through this conversation, we do actually garner that he is drawing energy from these Audra Pillars, which is a very important part of the story later. But he's very clearly drawing energy from the souls that are trapped and being used by the conduits in the Audra. So we come back to ourselves, and we can take our notes that we found and newfound information and leave the Engwithan dig site. From here we head back to Port Mage, speak to Governor Clario, who we can either give the notes to or not. You can choose to keep them. I don't remember offhand what this affects, but I don't remember it being particularly important either. And then once this is complete and you've freed the animancers that are still alive at the dig site, Clario will send the appropriate forces to help get your ship back into the sea. So from here you head back to the beach to the south, and then once you get there, your ship will be sea ready and you can actually get on it and leave this island. Here's a fun part. This part of the game is where you find out that ship management is going to be a part of this game. So the Deadfire is a whole pirate theme to it, and part of that is commanding your own ship. This involves having sailors to sail said ship, as well as keeping it stocked and ready to sail, as well as text-based ship battles. Now, I say text-based, but it's only half true. If you run into another ship and you wish to attack it, you can do that, and you can play out text-based battles and attack them that way. However, if you choose the ram option and you actually close the distance through the text event and eventually ram them, you can then board their ship and then have an actual combat, which I recommend doing if you actually play this game. because the text-based versions of those attacks are awful. But if you ignore all of that and just full speed ahead ram their boat with yours, and then board their boat, you can actually wrap that stuff up a lot quicker. But that's just a quick aside. Now that we are able to leave the island that had Port Mage on it, once we start sailing, you're going to be immediately accosted by a ship that is impossible to outrun. And I know it's impossible because they've literally coded it that way. People kept finding ways around it and they kept fixing it. It was a whole thing. You are confronted by a Captain Ferrante of the Principe. Principe? I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Like I said, I'm terrible with those. But basically, the Principe are pirates. They are pirates from Old Vela. Captain Ferrante explains that he's a member of the old guard of sorts, so to speak, of the Principe, and that the pirate that attacked you earlier is none other than Captain Binwith of the Drake. Captain Ferrante is not a big fan of Binwith or Binwith's master, Aeldus. Ferrante apologizes for the blatant attack that Binwith had on your ship earlier, and if you would like to track Binwith down, he's going to lend you the services of his best ship hunter, Seraphin. Seraphin is an Orlan cipher. A cipher deals in mind magic, thus making them great at doing things like tracking down ships. Seraphin will give you a side quest to infiltrate Fort Deadlight, where Captain Binwith, the pirate that attacked you earlier, is actually from. With all that out of the way, when we turned in our quest for the Ingwithan dig site earlier, Clario told us that the next place we should go to track down Aothis, because we explained that that's what we're trying to do, Clario explains that what you need to do is you need to sail north to Nekataka. Nekataka is the capital of the Deadfire archipelago, because in order to basically do anything more around here, you're going to need the permission, so to speak, of the Queen of the Deadfire archipelago, Queen Onikaza II. So that is our next destination. Now, while we're sailing north, we are going to hit a bit of an event of sorts, where we will be accosted on our ship by the gods. You'll basically start hearing some bells ring, and then you'll find yourself in the in-between talking to several of the gods. And basically, they want a progress report on what you've learned about Aothis. And you can tell them that, essentially, what we've already found out, Aothis is clearly drawing on the Audra. He's headed for more Audra Pillars. We gathered that much when we were speaking to him earlier. However, his exact motives for this are unclear. The gods seem confused that he's not trying to retake his place, because if you remember, he's been gone for a while. They thought he was dead, like completely gone. However, now that he's back, they assumed he was going to want to retake his place among the other gods, which he doesn't seem to be doing. And they start debating whether or not to just outright destroy the world to kill him. But ultimately, they decide to wait and see if you can't ascertain exactly what it is he's trying to do before they do anything. And that is where we are going to leave part 1. So we found ourselves in the Deadfire archipelago after our keep in Cadnua was destroyed by Aothis inhabiting a statue of Marosnua. We were attacked by pirates after we almost died from the attack on our keep. The pirates, as well as a storm, caused us to be shipwrecked on an island. We went to Port Mage to help get that situation sorted out. Did exactly that, got our help getting our ship back to being seaworthy, and now we are headed north to Nekataka to speak to the Queen of the Deadfire Archipelago for A, permission to, actually be here, and 2, to see if perhaps she or anyone in her kingdom has had reports of where Aothis might have went. So there you go, guys. That is part 1 of the story of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. All those things really help the channel out. We're growing every day. Can't thank you enough. Nonetheless, thank you for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.